Welcome to the Rescue One podcast. Each week we talk about challenging the way we do business in the fire service when it comes to mental and physical health. I believe there's a better way to do it, and I want to bring in experts that can teach us exactly how and why we should be doing things differently for the sake of our longevity on and off the job. If we can just rescue one of our brother or sister firefighters from preventable injury, illness, or disability, then we've done our job. Thanks for listening. Hey everybody, we are back on the Rescue One podcast. Today we got Stack from the Objectionables and the Things We All Carry podcast. And I was on his podcast about a month ago now, Stack. Was it like a month ago or something?
I think it was roughly a month, yeah.
Yeah, and we talked a lot. I wanted to kind of turn the microphone around and bring him on and talk to him because this is a guy that is always being the voice and the platform for other people, talking about their stories, their challenges, allowing their personal experiences with mental health and behavioral health to come to the forefront, which is so important. And, I wanted to hear about what makes him tick and also how he got started with some of the stuff. So, Stack, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about how long you've been on the job and what got you into the fire service.
All right. First of all, thanks for having me. It's always weird for me to be the guest on the show, so I have to kind of settle in and get used to this different role that I normally have the opposite role of. But as far as my fire service career goes, I started roughly 10 years ago. I came to the job very late in life. I was 44 when I started in the fire department. I got to a point in my life where the kids were out of the house. My kids are older, obviously. They're out of the house, and it came to a point where I could make a change and I could do something, not to sound selfish, but something for me, something I wanted to do. When I got out of high school, I'd gone into the Army, and in the Army, I did some medical stuff. I got out early from an injury, and then I pretty much for the time in between leading up to the fire service, I worked with special needs kids and families up until that point. I like to joke around and say that joining the fire department was safer than working with some of the kids that I was working with because they were very aggressive in some of their behaviors. So it's been 10 years in the fire service. I had no prior experience, volunteer or otherwise, and it was eye-opening to start, but it's been a very enjoyable career. It's a taxing career, and it doesn't come with its own set of issues, and I think that's how you and I got to know each other.
As far as like the original place you grew up in Florida, right? You grew up outside of Orlando, we were saying?
Yeah, I grew up in a little town called Maitland, just outside of Orlando, kind of Maitland Winter Park area. I graduated high school there, so I grew up from in roughly fourth grade to the end of high school, and immediately left there to join the Army. Because Florida's a pretty cool place to grow up. If you find the party life, it can get out of control pretty quickly, and that's what it was for me. High school was a blur for me. The thing I like to tell people, and my mom hates it, and so if she ever listens to this, she'll cringe. But about 30 days before graduation, when I already had my plans set to join the military, going into the Army, I knew what I was going to do in the Army. I already had the plans. The school calls her and says, yeah, he's not graduating. And as a single mom who I put through hell, she immediately said, pardon my language, she goes, oh, the fuck he isn't. And so I did probably 3/4 of my senior year in about a month so I could get the credits I needed to graduate, and I could get out of her house to save her life, basically.
Damn. Yeah, that's I think a lot of us can probably resonate with that. Like I always tell, because I run the youth program for my fire department, so I run the Explorers, and 14 to 21 is what they're in. And a lot of them, when they're joining, they're like, hey, Lieutenant Vogt, man, I'm really not that sharp of a student in school. I'm not like a 4.0 guy, and I'm like, perfect. Most guys and girls that get on the job are not, we're not academics, right? Like we don't like sitting behind a desk. We don't want people on the job that are only good at book work and nothing else. You know what I mean? And not saying, you don't have guys and girls that are really smart, but as far as like really enjoying sitting behind a desk, I don't think that's most people, So like I wasn't exactly the best student either, but I'm sure that probably kicks a lot of parents in the ass when they, when they hear that. But I mean, as far as like having a future and understanding it, it's like, it's really important to believe that, when you're younger, that's not you forever, like people change, people grow, forever. I think like hearing that, I know there's like a million of us out there that are like, yep, that was me,
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that as I grew up, I definitely went undiagnosed with some ADHD or something like that. And funny because you and I rescheduled our time today because I had a therapy appointment, and A couple of weeks ago, my therapist challenged me. She said, "You keep saying ADHD, but have you ever been tested?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Why don't we get you tested?" And I said, "Why would I want to do that?" And she goes, "You'll know, and you'll know what steps you can take." I said, "I've already learned that, but if I learned that I'm not ADHD, what the hell do I blame it on then?" I was like, I've got a crutch. Don't take my crutch away from me. So I'm pretty sure I grew up ADHD undiagnosed. And in Florida at the time, it was simple as, you need to get outside, or that kid ain't right. He's got to do something to burn off some energy. I think that kind of bit me in the ass at times, but I definitely, you're right. Sitting behind a desk was never going to be my strong suit.
So after that, how'd you land in Virginia?
Oh, long story. Let's see. We'll give you the circuitous route. I went to Fort Bliss, Texas for basic training. From Fort Bliss, I went to Fort Sam, which is also in Texas. From there, I went to Kentucky to Fort Knox. And then from Fort Knox, I went back to Florida until I moved back to Colorado. From Colorado, we went to Germany. From Germany, we came to Kansas. From Kansas, we went to Germany. From Germany, we relocated to Virginia and have been in Virginia since 2002.
Damn.
Yeah.
So well-traveled.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting. It was a good 20 years. And, now I call Virginia home. I'm in an interesting stage in my life.
In the time that you got in the fire service, and then until you decided to start, because the way I met you was through Instagram. I saw your page, the Objectionables, and I remember I was running Rescue One CBD's page for I want to say it was 6 months or up to a year or something like that, and I was on the search page, or the explore page, I should say, and I see this meme come up about fire department cannabis, and I'm like, who the hell is this guy? You know what I mean? Because it's very, what other pages are out there with that? You know what I mean? So I was like, I don't know who this guy is, but I like him already. I had followed your page a little bit. I was trying to get a little bit of backstory until you started doing stuff with the things we all carry. I don't think you put your story out there, or how you became an advocate for THC for firefighters. So what led you to creating that page, the Objectionables?
Oh, what led me to it? Let's see. I'll tread lightly and just say that.
I was going to say in a way that doesn't get us in trouble.
Right. I'll just say anything that I say here is just my opinion. I'm not representing any department, mine or any other department. I very rarely mention what my department is. I will tell you that I'm in Northern Virginia, and there are a couple of large departments up here, but I don't normally mention my department. At times I have an acrimonious relationship with my department. It has been rocky and it's been good, but there's definitely been rocky times. About 3.5 years ago, my department decided in their infinite wisdom that it would be better to work more hours for less pay. So they decided that we still are a combination system. We're a youngish fire department, 50 years, give or take a few, and we still depend on some volunteers for coverage. And whether you like to admit it or not, they are a vital part of our infrastructure. And I think we saw a moment where they thought they could get rid of volunteers, or at least affect enough change that it would be a career department supplemented by volunteers instead of what it had been in the past. And so they switched from a 24/48 with a Kelly to the 56-hour work week, which was what we call the Nova schedule. And I'm not sure what nationwide you might call it, but it is a day on, day off, day on, day off, day on, 4 off. And we knew that it was not going to be fun. Those 2 days in between a shift are nice for recovery. And then you look forward to a Kelly or a double Kelly, and you're looking at possibly 8 days off. And it was a great time to recover. On this schedule, you get 4 days off, but you can pay the price leading up to those 4 days off. And 2 of them are maybe quality days off. The first day and the last day are always iffy, because you don't know what sleep you're going to get on that last shift of the tour, and you don't know what kind of sleep you're going to get before you go into your first shift. And there was some pay compression, and they decided that they had to reorganize the pay schedule as well. And how it shook out eventually was some people at the top got a pretty good raise. Some people in that 7 to 10 year range got a little bit of a raise, but some of those guys that 5 years and below actually got a pay cut to go and work more hours. And I just thought that was brutal. Taking the youngest of the department, the future of the department, and you're asking them to do more for less when they're already in an area where they can't afford to live to begin with. And so on a whim, one of my coworkers and I were talking about, this is ridiculous. And he said, ask me about my 56-hour work week. And it became a sticker. And then it became, all right, well, how do I market the sticker? And then how do I get a voice out there? And that became, when the sticker started getting around, a battalion chief, and I won't mention him because he knows who he is, but he gave me the name because he deemed the sticker to be objectionable. And I said, thank you. That's a perfect name for what I'm doing here. And so I created the Objectionables Instagram. And it just ran from there. It was a chance to be a thorn in the side and to give some of the people a voice who have never had a voice before. And it was obviously needed because of the response we got.
What a perfect name for it, you know? And there's like a few moments, I think, like when you start on tasks or on missions or something like that, where you're like, you have like these aha types of things. That sounds like it was definitely one of them. That's kind of cool.
It was perfect. Yeah, like I said, it was handed to me by somebody in a position where they should probably have not had bit and reacted the way they did.
Hey, thank you.
Exactly.
You know, it's really interesting. You said, ask me about a 56-hour work week. So like, you know, I'm sure in the Army, and other jobs, and like everyone else, like a 56-hour work week is a lot, but it's not. Some people work like 65, 75, 80 hours a week, but everyone is going home and going to sleep for the most part. You know what I mean?
And I like to say that the 56-hour work week, and actually any of these work weeks, are misnomers, because it's not 56 hours, because in a stretch of 5 days, we're working 72 hours.
Absolutely.
So you can call it a 56, but that's a lie.
Yeah,
it's a 72 with a 4-day break. Okay, great.
Right.
It averages out to 56, but your body is working 72 hours at a stretch.
Yeah, your body doesn't care what stretch of the calendar you call a week. You know what I mean? This is interesting because I've heard James Gearing talk about this on Behind the Shield podcast. Yeah, man.
One of the best podcasts out there for firefighters and first responders.
Absolutely. Behind the Shield is amazing. And I've never spoken to him personally. I know you just had him on recently, right? Like a week or two ago or something like that.
Yeah, it's been a couple months now, but yeah.
Yeah. James had brought up, I've seen him react in comments to his followers about the best work schedule for firefighters. And 24/72 is it. And I'm lucky I have that schedule. I don't think a lot of people do. But the truth is, even a 24/48, it's kind of better than a 56-hour work week for your sleep. But the 56-hour work week is not, I mean, you're asking for long-term problems. The 4 days that you're off do not come close to making up a lack of sleep for each one of those days.
Yeah, the problem there is you can't make up the sleep. You can bank some sleep, but you can't make up what you've lost.
You can't. Not to mention the chronic state of inflammation that you're putting yourself in. So like, it's hard because you can't get data from what this is doing to your body's systems, your organs and stuff like that for years, decades even, you know, and you would actually have to study it. But the point is like, you know, we have this problem where we're looking at it from a dollars and cents point of view, or from a logistics point of view, or personnel point of view. And the fire department has this really unique ability, right, that other jobs don't have, where we could say, hey man, dangerous job, it's unhealthy, it's what you signed up for. You know what I mean? So,
and yeah, I get tired of hearing that. Yeah. This is what you signed up for. Actually, we didn't, because when the majority of us signed up for this job in my department, we signed up for a completely different schedule, and there was no mandatory holdover at the time. And now they've gone to the 56-hour work week, and people are using sick leave as a secondary form of leave because you can't get leave, and they've decided that they can't handle it. They've mismanaged their department to the point where they're short every day. Now we have mandatory holdover. So now you're not looking at 72 hours. Now you're looking at 84 hours. And that's the argument I want to make, and I've been making it lately, is this isn't a firefighter problem. This is a mismanagement problem. Departments have mismanaged how they run their department. And James and I talked about this on his show. It would just take one decision to say, you know what, yes, in the short term, it's going to be painful, but you can switch to a 24/72. And in the long run, it's going to benefit your organization beyond measure, because you're going to get better rested firefighters. You're going to get healthier firefighters and happier firefighters. And those three are key.
They are. Turnover goes down, costs go down. Healthier firefighters on the job cost less money, you know, and unfortunately, that's the only way you can pitch it to them, is because they can't see or measure by anything else. You know, when they see firefighters out on disability or insurance costs are high, they're like, well, you know, it's an unhealthy job, and they don't correlate the two, even though they are correlated, and it's tough.
When that's an issue, it should just say it's an unhealthy job, or these guys don't take care of themselves, or why don't you get more sleep when you're off? In some cases, you can't afford to get more sleep. And the fact that our start times, I don't know about yours or anybody else, but our start time is 6 a.m. And a lot of people can't afford to live in this county, and so they live an hour, 2 hours away. And so that now you're looking at a 6 o'clock start time.
Oh, wow.
Means they're getting up at 3:30 in the morning to come in to make sure they're here on time early, because as we all know, early is on time in the fire department. So some guys are getting up at 3 in the morning to get there by 5:30 or by 5:15, just to make sure you're there to relieve the next shift. And so then you're looking at one morning you're up at 3, the next morning you're up at 5:15, 5:30 for changeover. The next morning you're up at 3 again. And let's not mention the fact that you're running calls.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what about new guys? Like the new guys and girls that get hired, what time do they get to the firehouse in the morning? You know, like,
I think that mentality has to change somehow, and it has started to change in our department. I know it used to be like, you as a rookie, you have to be the first one in that door. In a typical situation like that 24:48, I think that was manageable. But
or a later start time.
Or a later start time, yes. Well, first of all, I ride a rescue. We have 2 rookies in our firehouse, but they don't really fall under my supervision at all. Not that I have any supervision, but I would not put that expectation on a rookie right now. My expectation for a rookie would be you need to take care of yourself before you can help anybody in this firehouse.
The premise, I understand. You know, the reason we ask rookies to get to the station first and to take all the crappy jobs without complaint and, you know, all that stuff that we ask of them is because we want to make sure that they're a good fit, that they can serve the citizens and the fire department, that they're a good fit in the fire department, that they're one of us, and that they're willing to show that they're going to do crappy jobs, because that's what the whole career is a series of things that are tough to do, or crappy jobs sometimes, you know, and that they're going to do it without complaint. So then the question is, like, can we get that done without making them get there, you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning?
You know, of course you can. You just moderate those, not expectations. You change how you place those expectations on them. All right, so what, your crossword puzzle isn't printed out by 5 in the morning? It's 5:30 when it's printed out? Okay, great. All right, the coffee is brewing when you walk in. It's not in the cup waiting for you. All right, you know what? You'll survive.
That's funny. Yeah. And I mean, ultimately we want to see they're worth a damn, you know, like I think there's other ways to do it. At my station, we've done that, you know, like we're trying to, like, well, you know, we'll tell them, like, yes, you're expected to jump up anytime there's chores to be done. You're expected to be the first person to volunteer for a crappy job. But we're evaluating you based on your ability to be a logical and critical thinking firefighter and somebody who's ready to work, you know, and not complain. So take that into account. But I feel like we don't have a place to compare because I'm not on that schedule. We start at 7:30 and we have a 24/72. And
yeah, it's beautiful.
I know, like, yeah, I'm lucky, man. But, you know, I'm speaking on behalf of the fire service that 99.9% of us don't have that schedule, you know, and I think another thing that James was saying when he was talking to some of these sleep experts was like the 12-hour shifts are the worst, you know, the overnight 12s. So it's just constant interruption of that circadian rhythm. So yeah, I think that would totally make sense. But where does the jump from the ask me about my 56-hour work week sticker to THC happen?
I've always been a proponent of THC. Always. Yeah. Now, listen, my high school support of THC was a whole different reason than my adult support of THC. I definitely dabbled in high school. I joined the military. I didn't smoke. Obviously, I didn't use in the military. And a good chunk of time in my adult life, I just put it aside and didn't even think about it. But then as the studies, I happen to like to read. I like to keep up on cutting edge stuff. And as these studies came out from the limited trials across the country, and they showed the benefits of THC in a multitude of ways, then it's something you have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And it was a conversation with a coworker of mine, and he and I had the same outlook on it. And we just started pushing an envelope a little bit, throwing the feelers out there. Virginia passed medical marijuana first. And so if you got your medical card, you could go to the dispensary, purchase the dispensary weed or oils or whatever you wanted, and that was completely legal. And then they passed employee protections for it as well. So meaning in the state of Virginia, if you have your medical marijuana card and you test positive at work, you're protected by the state of Virginia. So yeah, so it doesn't matter the levels in your system. It doesn't matter that if there's no impairment, and that can be determined by your local law enforcement. If there's no impairment and you still test positive, you're protected under medical marijuana laws. We brought it to the fire chief and we said, what are you going to do about this? This is coming. You need to be prepared for it. And he said, and then we also brought up CBD at the same time. And I figured out how limited their knowledge was when he told me, I don't even want CBD in the firehouse because that will cause impairment. And I said, wait, time out. We need to start here. And you start with CBD, and we show them the studies and show them the science behind it. And you know the science better than I do behind CBD, but it's non-intoxicating basically. And so we started there, and I said, but listen, you do realize that this is coming. You need to be prepared for this. It will be passed in July. We knew the date. July 1st, it became legal. Not only did the employee protections pass on July 1st, but at that point, recreational marijuana became legal in the state of Virginia. You just had to use it in the confines of your home. And you could grow a certain amount of plants, and you could possess a certain amount. So it was becoming obvious that Virginia was progressing along the lines of legalization. And you can't bury your head in the sand and pretend that it's not going to affect first responders. It is, because they're also citizens of the state. So, of course, they're going to pay attention, and they're going to want to use it and experiment with it. Despite the amount of time we were spending with him, they didn't do anything. I think it was like 8 o'clock on the last day of June 2 years ago, and an IB went out, and a bulletin went out and said, oh, just to remind you, you're not allowed to use THC. There's a zero tolerance on THC. And then they started talking about ramping up testing again. And it was like, are you serious? We're going to take a step backwards on this when the whole state is taking a step forward? And so I just became more of a vocal. I raised my voice at that point.
That was kind of when more like you started posting about THC on the Objectionables page, or like that just kind of started amping it up a little bit?
Both. It definitely started. I don't think I ever shied away from it. When I noticed that there was an issue with it, or that it was a possibility, that there's time to start talking about it. Yeah. I think one of the things I always wanted to use the Objectionables as, and it's really morphed away from it, but initially what I wanted to use that as, it was just a voice, and to give voice to every issue or aspect of the fire service that I could. We've always been expected to just go along to get along, because that's what you do. It's a paramilitary organization. You just follow directions. It's a different day and age, and there's science out there that proves that some of the things that we were told we can't do or shouldn't do, we probably should be doing. And there's also a point where there were some directives and some, I don't know. It was a weird dynamic in our department where I just needed to give voice to some of the issues. And so THC was one of the big ones. THC and psychedelics. Those were two big ones that I thought needed to be heard.
Yeah, and as far as psychedelics, you have way more depth of knowledge on this than I do. I have read basic research, like some of the stuff that's being tried. Colorado was one of the earlier ones to, I think Washington might have been the first, if I'm not mistaken, but then Colorado legalized psilocybin. Their purpose originally was for psychiatric care, but this research has been going on for a long time, and that organization, I'm sure you follow on MAPS, they have been citing lots of research and advocating the FDA, who's doing clinical studies now with psychedelics.
And, and just so people know, MAPS stands for Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, I believe, something along those lines. And they've done, I think they're in their third round of clinical trials. And they started with military, PTSD, those in the military who qualify for a clinical diagnosis of PTSD. I believe it was PTSD and anxiety, maybe depression. I'm not a professional. This is all just from my memory. But what they're finding is that it was guided therapies with whatever psychedelic. I think it was LSD and psilocybin. Guided therapies, so you had a therapist who would administer a dose, and they would talk you through a therapy session. And I think that it was set up where you would have 3 separate sessions. And when I first read about MAPS, they were having such success, that a lot of people were doing 1 or 2 sessions and going, no, I don't think I need to come in for a third. And so they were having this success almost immediately with these treatments. And of course, can you have a bad trip? Of course you can have a bad trip, but probably not in that setting, because it's a low dose and it's a guided therapy. So as for the side effects or the negative parts, I'm not really sure what they were or if there were, but it's to the point where they're pretty close to getting some approval here on therapies.
Yeah, that to me is another avenue that I believe needs to be explored as well. And it's probably even less known as far as research and science behind it. It's probably even less known than cannabinoids.
Ketamine is approved for treatments in all 50 states.
Yeah, I
and
saw
that's
that.
a lot of people don't realize that there are clinics in every state for ketamine therapy, and it's very effective.
But ketamine's not Schedule 1,
But for the benefits, and it does have a psychoactive component to it, and the benefits are very similar, because as I forget which show it was, and I apologize. It might have been James' show, Behind the Shield. I'm not sure, and if I got it wrong, I do apologize. But there was a story being told of the lady who had experienced being raped at one point in her life. And she couldn't get over it. She had gone to trauma therapy and she had done this and done that. She was over most of it, and I use quotation marks, over it. But there was one piece she couldn't figure out what she couldn't get past because something would trigger her all the time. And so she describes her experience with ketamine, where she went in for this ketamine therapy. She went under and they started doing the guided therapy, and the alarm clock popped into her head. So what had happened was, when she went through the experience, she indexed it wrong in her brain. Obviously, your brain couldn't understand what was happening, took a trauma and put it in there in a weird way. So it was a bad memory, obviously, but it was a triggering memory. And apparently what had happened during it, she was looking at an alarm clock and she blocked that out. She didn't know that until she went under ketamine therapy. And then she clearly saw the alarm clock, understood what was going on. And after that one treatment with the ketamine therapy, was able to almost re-index that memory and put it away appropriately.
Yeah, and when you say re-index, can you explain, like, what that means? Like, how do people re-index that?
There's so much science behind it that I'm such a layman at it, and I'm going to butcher this. So
Perfect, because that's who everybody listening and myself is too.
Perfect. I've had the therapist on twice on my show, and she goes by the moniker the sweary therapist. And so it's sweary therapy, and she does a really good job of explaining this. And so I'll try to paraphrase what she said. If you think of it, she uses EMDR. Are you familiar with EMDR? Okay.
Eye movement stuff?
Rapid eye movement desensitization. So it's a way of talking about an experience while you're either following something or you're listening to something, and it's back and forth. So if I'm looking, I've done it with my therapist before. So she uses her hands. She would take her fingers and almost metronome them, if that makes sense. So back and forth. And I have to follow with my eyes. And while my eyes are following that, we're talking about the experience. And so what that's doing is, it's, in a weird way, it's relaxing the brain, and you're able to talk about the experience without the emotion of the experience. And it just takes that thought and puts it away where it's supposed to go, as opposed to putting it there and it being a point of contention. And so the ketamine apparently does that same thing through that therapy. So we take these traumas and our brain doesn't know how to deal with them. And then you add in lack of sleep, lack of personal care, whatever it is, you add all that stuff in, and your brain doesn't know what to do with a memory or with a trauma. And it could be, for us, it could be an infant CPR. It could be a stoppage of breathing, a CPR in the middle of the night. It could be an auto accident that obviously can be violent. And if you're with that uninterrupted sleep and the patterns that we have, you don't always file that away appropriately, and you don't talk about it, and it kind of festers, and then it becomes a trauma. Those therapies take that and reorganize your thoughts and make it an appropriate memory to the point where it's not affecting your daily life.
So basically, the thing that you were triggered by is being triggered almost like as a defense mechanism, and you're turning it back into something normal again. That alarm clock that she was seeing is no longer a triggering event. It's just an alarm clock.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a very rudimentary explanation. And someone out there is screaming at me like, no, you idiot, that's not what it is. And I get that. So I'm not a professional.
But if people haven't been through that before, you know what I mean? Like, there's no other frame of reference. So obviously we're trying to ballpark it, if you will, but it provides a little bit of understanding of why ketamine's used. And from what I understand, psychedelics like psilocybin are in the same way. You know what I mean? If that's a fair description. But I want to go back to, well, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to, psilocybin, they all affect differently because there's various classes of psychedelics. Psilocybin, LSD are probably the most popular because they're the ones you hear about in the States quite often. Psilocybin, LSD, ketamine, it could even be peyote, ayahuasca, ibogaine. Those are like the big players, and they all affect you and affect your brain differently. Some of them are like this long, slow thing, and some of them are this quick, violent thing. Like ibogaine is probably like the nuclear option. Like you're going to get hit hard and you're not going to enjoy it, but it's going to reorganize a lot in your head. It's a combination of two African plants. And again, I'm not a professional. I haven't really studied how ibogaine is made or how it's used, but it has some very powerful restorative properties for not just emotional, but also some physical as well.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that one. I've heard of, DMT and ayahuasca, and I thought those were like pretty heavy too.
Yeah, if you take ayahuasca, obviously ayahuasca is a powerful one, but ibogaine is that one where if you use it, you really don't want to use it again. You're not going to get addicted to this stuff, but it's going to help.
Yeah, a friend of mine recently who's been going through a lot of mental health issues was having trouble overcoming them, took ayahuasca. I called him, like a couple of weeks later and asked him how it went, and he couldn't tell me over the phone. He's like, we have to sit down. He's like, this is a whole conversation. He's like, it was not fun. And he said, it's a tool. It's definitely not something that people want to do often, which, it's good that you see it that way. But yeah, it's interesting. Like when people say, they're worried about an addiction profile. I'm like, I don't know if it's the same. I mean, I know psilocybin it can be a lot more enjoyable, but I know it doesn't have a dopamine trigger like heroin does or an opiate. You're not getting that reward system. You don't really hear about people wrecking their lives and losing everything over psilocybin. I got addicted to mushrooms and now I lost everything because I just can't stop buying them. It's not happening.
Just makes that concert that much more enjoyable to watch a light show.
That's it. I want to.
So I've heard.
I want to. Yeah, allegedly. I want to go back, and when we talked about, you were mentioning that the consensus around departments in Northern Virginia was, generalizing, the consensus around departments in Northern Virginia was zero tolerance for marijuana. But this policy, this protection, this employer protection just came out. What, if any, policy change has happened in maybe your department or other departments to reflect that? Has there been any?
There have been a couple of departments across the state who have decided that, yeah, this is the future because it's here. It's in the state. Like I said, it's law in the state of Virginia. The Commonwealth passed it that employee protections are in place for medical marijuana use. I would love to say that my department was progressive enough to go, hey, yeah, this is what we need to do. Let's put this in place. We'll put a common sense policy in place for use of THC, which common sense is very easy. With cancer presumption laws, you're not going to smoke it. So it'll be any use other than smoking, and kind of a bottle to throttle rule like you would do a pilot. So 12 hours before a shift, you're not using. Then you'll put in a piece to determine impairment, and that would be through the local law enforcement. And the reason I say local law enforcement, because we all know that there are officers out there who, A, can't tell what impairment is, and B, are vindictive. So if they have an issue with you and you come in tired one day, they're like, I think he's stoned. I'm gonna F with him, and they're gonna accuse you of coming in impaired after smoking or whatever. That just leaves it too much to the personal interpretation. So you would use local law enforcement to do a test for impairment. From there, you could go for a urinalysis. And then from the urinalysis, if there's certain levels in the urine, you can go to a blood gas draw, and then you can determine usage a little closer with a blood gas draw. Yeah. So there's ways of building a common sense policy. That's not what happened. What happened was somebody tested positive. The county said, this is zero tolerance, so we're going to fire you. Put in paperwork, drove it up the chain. The county attorney said, nope, can't do that. They're protected, and sent it back. And that forced a change in policy.
So that's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask if there was a problem.
The policy that came out, okay, it's very gray. It's don't come to work impaired, don't have anything on work grounds, which all makes sense. If you responsible use, you're not going to do that anyway. Doesn't put into black and white what would happen if you're in an accident as a driver and you happen to have THC in your system. It doesn't put into black and white what these levels for triggering test, or if there would be test. It just says there will no longer be tested on your yearly physical.
And this was what I was going to ask, if there's legal or disciplinary issues, because a lot of times there's no incentive for a municipality or a county fire department attorney or city or county attorney to stick their neck out and say, like, hey, look, effective July 1st, Virginia is making this employee protection law, and if they fail a drug test, then we can't fire them. Let's be proactive and do all this stuff. What they'll probably do is wait for a disciplinary issue to happen and then react to it.
And that's exactly what happened.
And that's what I'm worried about with my department, with every other. I'm in Florida. It's only medically legal here. It's not recreational. But I'm listening to places like Virginia, the state of New York, FDNY and Buffalo are both dealing with fallout from this. The state of New Jersey, with their law enforcement, there's certain employee protection, that's happening.
Law enforcement adds a whole nother level to it because of federal firearms laws.
Which is crazy because the state of New Jersey, their attorney general just said police are protected. They cannot be told they can't use THC off duty. And to do so is discrimination. It's already been determined at the Supreme Court. There's past precedent. This happened earlier this year. And actually, it happened before April, just before April, because I was at FDIC and I talked to several firefighters in New Jersey that were mentioning this to me. And for some reason, it doesn't extend to fire departments, but the Attorney General specifically mentioned police officers. He said all sworn law enforcement officers in the state of New Jersey cannot be fired for failing a THC drug test. The police chiefs, several police chiefs, union police chiefs, came to the Attorney General and said, hey, look, we can't test for this. We can't prove impairment or sobriety from THC while they're on duty. So I understand what you're saying, but how do I prove it one way or the other? And the Attorney General, in a very nice and political way, said, not my fucking problem. Like, you guys have been burying your head in the sand for this for years. I don't know what to tell you. This is basically a civil liberty issue. This is a constitutional right. It falls under discrimination if you try to withhold promotion, employment, or employment status based on what they do off duty. The Drug-Free Workplace Act is just that. It's for the workplace. It has nothing to do with what they do at home. And that's been brought to court too and lost. So we have like this really gray area that I don't think chiefs know exists. And in cases like yours, where you go into the office and you explain to them THC and CBD and they can't even give you the rudimentary understanding of those things, you're like, hey, I'm not saying that you need to know this stuff, right? How am I expecting you to run the fire department and also be an expert in cannabinoids, right? Like, that's not fair. But let's look at what experts say and also know that the legality is going to come barreling down on top of places like this, because the New York City Fire Department just got told the same thing. They got an email one morning and they're like, effective immediately, we're stopping testing for THC. Nobody knew, right? Like, and they said, it's illegal. It's illegal to test you for THC. The Attorney General walked into the chief's office. I'm paraphrasing, but he walked into the chief's office and dropped a document on his desk and said, what you're doing right now is illegal. You were to stop it, effective immediately. And I mean, like, I don't know if the state of Virginia had specific exceptions for firefighters or first responders as far as because like the state of California has a law coming out that does the same thing, where it says employees cannot be fired for failing a THC drug test. But then they have a exclusion clause where they say if you're a first responder, you can still get fired for using THC. It sounds like Virginia didn't do that. But if there's testing out there, especially like I understand the oral fluid will show 12 to 24 hours of use. If you can see that, it's not as accurate. But if you fail an oral fluid test, it's like, okay, maybe they've used it recently. Now let's go in for a blood test. Oral fluid tests are cheap. Blood tests are expensive. But if you do like a saliva swab and they fail it, then you can send them in for a blood test. But if you see somebody at work and they just look tired and you're like, oh, you're intoxicated, and you do an oral fluid test and they pass, it's like, all right, I guess you are just tired. Call it a day.
Lack of sleep can mimic intoxication.
Exactly. We're not even allowed to go on scene and see somebody who's drunk and assume they're intoxicated. We have to leave that up to professionals who've been trained, and not even just a regular law enforcement officer, a person who's been specifically trained in DUI procedures, because low blood sugar can cause it. A stroke can cause it. You know what I mean? There's like all these other factors that are mimics, and we need to apply the same kind of thinking to THC. But are you guys union? Has your union come out and said that they have intentions or are on top of it, or?
You got another hour to talk about
God.
unions? We can do that.
Like
Virginia,
that, huh?
up until very recently, was a strict right-to-work state. And I won't get into the politics behind to work, but I think most people are misled about what right-to-work means. Our union was impotent up until just very recently, and they reinstated the ability to bargain for collective bargaining. So wrap your head around that. You can get a collective bargaining agreement. It doesn't have to mean anything. So you have to deal with your municipality. So in our case, it's a board of county supervisors. and you have to come to them and say, this is what we want to do. We want the right to use collective bargaining. So we do have a union. Up until recently, it was pretty toothless. They work their ass off. I give credit to them. They do try to work their ass off, but you meet resistance left and right, and neither side were really willing to cooperate with them. We just recently passed a collective bargaining ordinance, but we can't talk about certain things. First and foremost, we can't talk about our work schedule. We can't bring that to the table in our bargaining, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. And the joke around the firehouse is, at least we have a seat at the table. Yeah, that seat at the table is like a clip-on toddler seat that you put in the kids' table. Yeah, it's right. You're there, but you're not contributing anything. So what's our seat at the table actually mean? I don't know. I was told very early on in this fight for marijuana that, hey, man, I don't know what you're doing. I don't think you need to make waves. I don't care about making waves. Someone needs to make waves. And I actually thought some of the guys in the union are going to kill me, but I actually thought the union was there to make waves. In some cases they do. In some cases they don't. Marijuana was one where they didn't want to make too many waves. And eventually they do start to make waves. But anything with marijuana union-wise has been, we don't know what it's going to look like if you test positive. We just need someone to test positive. No one's going to do that. That just doesn't make sense. No one's going to willingly test positive. We had a couple that turned in their medical marijuana card and said, here, I want this on my file. So if I do test positive, why? And then that would be a legal avenue to go. And that took balls. I agree. That took balls to do that. Yeah. I don't think it's necessary, but it took balls to do that. There's a few of us in the department who were very vocal about the support for marijuana. And people, of course, assumed that we were all using. That wasn't always the case. But no, when it comes to union, it was more of we're not really sure where this is going to go.
I think for the most part, you're describing most of America, though. You know what I mean? I don't think, and look, from a union point of view, I understand where they're coming from. Anytime you sit down with a negotiating team across the table from your county commissioners, your city commissioners, or your city manager, or whoever you have to negotiate with, anytime you want something, you have to give something up. There is no such thing as a solution. There's only trade-offs. And
it's funny. Yeah, I understand that. We haven't even gotten to the point where we're sitting across the table from them at this point.
Which is kind of crazy. But like, to develop a relationship, they don't want to rock the boat on things that are really tough to justify. And they draw the line sometimes not far enough where they'll say, like, to me, THC use is a argument and a cause worth fighting for, worth giving up some shit. It all depends on your personal preference or what you're willing to endure to get that. But obviously, I'm in the minority. I don't think that most people would even give up a couple of % pay raise to get THC in their contract. And I also know that, cities and counties know that they would be able to take a lot from us to be able to get that. So like, it's a hard thing to go for, but I also know that there is no way that we're going to make progress unless there are some waves. And if they have that problem where somebody just fails a drug test and they can react to it, they're thinking that might set the precedent.
I've recently started to make the argument, and again, it's a reframing of the discussion or the argument. People want to say, all right, at the local level, the union is going to deal with this. I'm tired of the local level. I think the national union needs to step up.
Amen.
I think that there's two things that they need to do for us, and they're failing us because they're not doing it. One is the work schedule. They need to work their asses off. They need to get every chip and cash it in and outlaw the 56-hour work week. They're allowing us to suffer. And this is an organization that's supposed to be protecting us. They're not. They're failing us there because they're not fighting for the schedule. That schedule should be outlawed federally. And the only reason that municipalities get away with instituting a 56-hour work week is because the federal government has said you're allowed to. So that's a federal fight. Marijuana is a federal fight. Both of those need to be changed at the federal level. Fuck the local level.
I agree. Like we were talking about off podcast, myself and Stephanie White, who I'm sure a lot of people have read some of the stuff she's written for fire engineering.
She's also been a guest on the show, and I've been on her show. She's good people.
Yeah, she's good people. She writes well, and she also has kind of become the de facto voice for cannabis and fire engineering. You know what I mean? Just because she's written about it a few times now. And I think that taking things like that and trying to get researchers behind it and bring it up to a national level is what's going to matter. But you can't just like kind of idle by. At one point we have to shit or get off the pot and somebody's got to kick the door in. I'm going to work on that too. I have my own plans here, and there's a lot of things that we're trying to do to start getting ready to bring up to a national level, but something as simple as we started the National Firefighter CBD survey, and we have over 1,000 questionnaires filled out on that. Some of these people, there's a small portion in there where you can write in comments. If you ever want to feel good about the future of CBD or cannabis in the fire service, you just go on this freaking, it's public, it's on Survey Planet, but the survey, the National Firefighter CBD survey, you scroll through there and you read what CBD or cannabis has done for these people. And it's amazing, man. If I'm ever bummed out or having a hard time with the business, I just scroll through that thing and it gives me just all the fucking motivation I need. It's amazing. But the fact that we have that many people who have come out and said, yes, I use CBD. Most of them are using CBD, but some of them are using cannabis because they're allowed to. And they'll say, yeah, here's what it did. And then one of the last questions is, do you feel the IAFF should regulate this policy? And it's like 99% say yes. The overwhelming response from us is that do something about this. So I'm hoping that things like this and all of the data behind stuff like how crappy a 56-hour work week is for your schedule, you bring up to the IFF and you say, look, this isn't an opinion. These are facts. The fact is that 99% of us want you to do something about cannabis. The fact is that 56-hour work weeks are a killer, an actual killer of firefighters. And if you want working conditions to improve, which is the mandate of the IFF, you got to start with the things that we want. It's set up so that locals have to deal with these things. You know, they're like, well, that's a local issue. You know, you have a 56-hour work week, it's a local issue. Like, if you are in, it is 100%. And how do you gain, not to mention, it's like, okay, put it on the local. What is the local going to have to give up to get rid of a 56-hour work week and go to 24/72? Basically, your firstborn son. They're going to go, if you have a defined benefit pension plan, that's immediately, they're like, yeah, we'll give you a 24/72. Get rid of your pension. That's what they'll do. They'll go, how bad do you want it? I'm telling you, man. Like, you know why I say that? Because in my department, anytime we have a big ask for our contract, they take our 24/72 and they're like, yeah, we'll give you what you're asking for. Get rid of your 24/72 and go back to a 24/48. They hold that over our head every time so that we back off. Because everybody knows that that's just like a non-starter, and it always will be. And I'm glad for that, but that's a non-starter.
And that kind of takes me to the podcast and mental health side of things, because that's been the discussion I've had with numerous people, to include someone like James Gearing, is the fact that you hear it every day, and well, at least I hear it every day, how many years you have left. And it's an odd question to me, because you don't have any years left. It's what you choose as what you have left. And I understand what they mean by how many years do you have left. They want to know how many till you're 20 or 25 in, and you can retire with a certain pension and in all the full benefits. But I tell young people to have caution on that now. You don't have to stay 20 years in this job. That's a choice. And people are going, you're throwing away 10 years of service. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm just not going to stick around and let my health suffer for another 10 years of service. Yeah. So what we're looking at is almost a cost fallacy. You're looking at a sunken cost fallacy. So you've thrown 10 years into this job, and you're convinced that if you don't finish out, then you're throwing those years away. You're not. What you're doing is, it might be a fear thing. And even in my case, I know that I don't want to do this for 10 more years. I don't know if I'll do it for another year. But there's a certain comfort to a paycheck every 2 weeks. Yeah. You know, so you have to find the replacement to that. I'll call myself out. I just have the balls to find that replacement. Yeah. This job is not healthy. Some people can do it for 30 years and be okay. Some people can do it for 10 years and not be okay. Yeah. Your time to go is when you know it's your time to go, not according to what your retirement says. I used to say to people, oh, don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. You got this, you got that. Now it's, you want to go. I support it 100%. I don't care what you do. Go do something different. Find your happiness, because this job doesn't supply that for you. And this is just that. It's a job. It's not who we are. It's a job.
Yeah, it is. And it's a great job, and I love it. I wouldn't trade the route I've taken for anything. But fire departments are built so that you can be replaced very quickly. And they have to be that way. You know, we should be that way. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like the military. You know, you're constantly training someone to step into the role that you are doing in case something happens to you, or just for attrition when people leave. The organization can't just collapse because one person left. I mean, even businesses should run like that. You should always be bettering people and getting ready for the next thing, but don't hinge your entire life on something that, you know, doesn't depend on you.
You say it shouldn't collapse if one person leaves, but the problem is and I think it's across the country because it's prevalent with everybody I speak to, those attrition rates are just climbing. And it all goes back to the fact that this job, it's changed. We're running a lot more calls. Some departments are running a lot more calls with less money. And so it does start to take a toll on you. And people are realizing that, okay, I got into this for a reason. I'm going to get out for my own benefit, my own health. And even in my department, that the attrition rate for the last year is astronomical. Even you know, chiefs can bury their head in the sand and say it's not, but it is. The numbers don't lie. And so, yeah, one person might not hinder the department, but when 80 leave, it hinders the department to the point where, okay, let's start cutting down. Let's find a way to eliminate a month of recruit school so we can get recruits out a month earlier. What part are you going to eliminate? Because for years now, you've said that it's all necessary to be a complete firefighter. So now we're going to send incomplete firefighters out to the field? That's a brilliant idea.
Crazy. Brother, you had mentioned that you don't know how much longer you're going to, you know, it could be 1 year, it could be 10 years. And recruitment is a problem. Attrition rates are a problem. Let me describe to you what a department just north of us in my county had done. So this city, small town, not small town, they got like 6 firehouses. The city of Boynton Beach, Florida, they just stopped testing for THC and they moved to a 24/72 schedule.
It's brilliant.
I think they start around $60,000 a year. And you have to be a paramedic to work there. But, you know, they have like a 25-year pension. And at a city where I think they run like, I want to say they run about 15,000 calls a year, you know. So they're not like super busy. They're, you know, some stations are busier. But what do you think my department, which all we've had to do big recruitment is, you know, and we're a Florida department, not too far from them, 24/72. There's a few departments in Florida that have that. But they, you know, as far as recruitment, that was the one thing that we had. Now somebody else has it and they don't test for THC.
This is exactly my argument. And I told this to our acting chief now because our fire chief left. Our acting chief, I said, do you know, overnight you become the most progressive department in Virginia if we can go to a 24/72 with THC. We can't do that because it costs money. What you're telling me is that my life and the life of my partner isn't as important as your bottom line. So I see that you do put that dollar value on our lives. So it's at that point you go, okay, this is still about money. It's not about people, and it always has been.
Yeah, I mean, the city of Boynton, they're not very affluent. They've always had budget shortfalls. They took a grant from the SAFER grant to hire a whole shift worth of people. So they had to hire like 20 people to be able to put on that D shift. They're assuming that their realized taxation from the housing going fucking gangbusters in Florida is going to start, you know, bringing in a windfall for the pay. I don't know what's going to happen after that, where they're going to keep the money, or, you know, as far as like if they just raise taxes or whatever else. But, you know, they're looking at a one-time cost to hire all these people and then the maintenance behind it. There's no more Kelly, because with a Kelly, you still have to have a certain amount of people in excess so that you can pad those shift personnel minimum requirements, but you do still have to hire some people. So it's a matter of like just taking the understanding that you could get a grant and do the one-time hire and then however you're maintaining it after. But there is a cost to that. There is no cost to eliminating THC testing. Arguably, you're saving money. You could at least start in some respect being there. And you mentioned that you could become the most progressive department overnight. I don't think that's their goal. You know, I think that we hold on to traditions, and I think you say the word progressive to them and it's extremely cringy to them. They're like, ugh. Like, oh, yeah, I know what that means. You know what I mean? And one of my captains, who's now a good friend of mine, is chief, he told me, he's like, firefighters hate 2 things, change and the way things are, you know? And like, there's going to be a hard sell when it's the people who are most ingrained with that and the traditions of the fire service, and that's, you know, administration. It's a hard sell. But I do know that places like Pittsburgh, the West Coast, California, Washington, and now starting Colorado a little bit, they're kind of leading the way with how we can logically attack these things, you know, these problems, with how we can police THC. Hopefully it leads down towards psychedelics. And we know that it's not this dirty word anymore, and that, you know, we basically have been criminalizing and vilifying something that's basically just a plant. I was working the other day at a football game. I'm at a stadium. One of the cops comes up to me from another agency, comes up to me, and he's like, he hears me talking about THC to one of our people because we were talking about, you know, Boynton legalizing it. And he's like, oh yeah, that's never going to happen in Florida. I'm like, you don't think so? And he goes, no. And I'm like, it's happening everywhere else. And he's like, yeah, all those hippies out there, they think it's good for you because it comes from the ground. I started chuckling. I'm like, you know, like a ton of medication is made out of plants, right? Like aspirin is salicylic acid. It's a compound found in bark. Like There's chemotherapy drugs that are made from a flower in Madagascar. Atropine is made out of a flower. Like, I'm like, dude, if you're trying to sink an argument with that, that's a horrible one. Tons of medication are made from plants. It's so funny how quickly it gets dismissed. We're like, no, if it's effective, it's got to be made in a lab. It's got to have a chemist who has a whole formula behind it. And there needs to be a 3-phase FDA trial to say that this stuff's effective, and you're like,
I think the easiest way to put it is it can only be effective if it's making somebody money.
Well, that is kind of how the system is set up, because with the system, the way it's set up, if you go to your doctor, the doctor's got to make money, right? So when you go in there and you say, Doc, I'm having trouble sleeping, what's the doc going to say? Is he going to say, well, you should really listen to experts on sleep and try to time your circadian rhythm a little better. And in your days off, here are some things that you can do with daylight. And
a lot easier to write a script for Ambien.
Or you can write a script for Ambien and you can charge for it. And if the pill costs you $20, you can charge insurance $60. The incentive is not to be naturopathic. And we immediately call everybody a witch doctor or a hippie or and don't get me wrong, man, medication has its place. You know what I'm saying? I've said this a million times. I when I had foot surgery, I was taking opiates because that was the only thing that was going to stop me from being in excruciating pain 24 hours a day. But, at some point, I wish I could have just used THC instead,
No, definitely. Obviously, we know what the pain pills and the pill mills and all that have done, especially very close to my part of the country. The Appalachians have been decimated by it.
Yeah. I want to end with one question. I want to ask you, what would you say is the biggest problem with the fire service health and wellness today? If we had to sum it up, that's the big one.
It's sleep. Everything stems from sleep, in my belief. And this is a topic that we've talked about quite a bit at work, and I've talked about with people like James, and had a doctor from George Mason on the show. His name is Joel, and he's done a lot of research. He tried to do a sleep study with our department, and they refused to do it before we switched to a 56. So that just tells me that they don't want to know the effects, and they don't want to know the changes that would have been made on a body. Because if they had taken those studies when we were still in the 24-48 with the Kelly and 3 years and then retested everybody, I would be fascinated to find out what the change in our bodies would be. I understand this is correlation. It's not causation because there's no science behind it. But I do know that our BMI is up across the board in our county in the last couple of years. There's increases in people calling out. There's increases in some of the negative things like injuries. Now, can it be attributed solely to the sleep? Probably not. It's probably a mix of things, but I think sleep is the foundation for it all. But we don't do ourselves favors either. Let's not say we're blameless. Or yeah, the schedules can suck, but damn it, we're drinking, we're staying up late. We're doing harm to our bodies outside of work. And I challenge people to stop and look at what their piece can be. Because I'll go back to therapy because, like I said, I had therapy this morning. One of the things that my therapist and I have been working on is what's in my control. I can be affected by things around me and stressed out and anxious and depressed, whatever reaction it is. But can I really? Because I just need to focus on what's in my control. So I can't control my schedule right now because I'm a firefighter in my county and my schedule is what my schedule is. But I can control what I do outside of that schedule. I can control not getting drunk. I can control eating. I can control trying to establish somewhat of a healthy sleep pattern on those days off. Meaning, okay, you set the stage in your room, you put that phone down at a certain time, you get up at a certain time every day, which I know annoys people because they think, if I don't sleep in, how am I going to get the rest? Your body will tell you when you're tired, go to bed when you're tired, get up at the same time every day. You can set yourself up for some success. And as a whole, for firefighters, we don't do that. We set ourselves up for failure, and then we like to say it's the schedule. And I know I bitch about the schedule, but there's some things we can do for ourselves. And until we all do those things for ourselves, we can't just bitch about the schedule. I think it's sleep. And I think that within the fire department, obviously, you can't schedule calls. Someone's going to call you at 2 a.m. I understand that. But what you can do is you can say, from this point forward, when we build a firehouse, we're going to build a firehouse with individual bunk rooms. And those bunk rooms are going to have an alerting system that they don't wake you up unless it's your unit going out on a call. Again, but that costs money. I don't fucking care. It's human lives dealing with. I don't care if it costs money. Suck it up.
And it's not that much.
No.
It really isn't. One of my guys was doing studies on this, especially when you do it when the station's built. It's way, way easier.
Yeah, and I was part of a crew when we opened a new station 2 years ago, I think. Yes, going on 2 years now. We were very worried because it was individual bunk rooms. I don't know if we're going to like that. It's going to be weird getting used to it. The first night you slept in there and you got solid sleep, you're like, oh, I got this. This is money. Now, there have been a couple of people that have slept through calls because you don't get the rustling of the crew getting up and running out, but they probably would have slept through a call anyway, because if you're sleeping through the WestNet system and the tone's being dropped, you're probably just dead tired. And so it's, all right, I got you back. I'll knock on your door on the way out.
Yeah, and that's not the excuse. Like, sleeping through calls happens, sometimes. It has nothing to do with the alerting system or how much people go through, and I don't buy that one. But, to go back to your point, I think those 4 days off, it's like, what are you doing with your 4 days off? Because I know that's kind of everybody's weekend. Nobody's probably going out and drinking and staying up late and doing all their stuff on their 1 day off. They're going to do it on their 4 days because they're going to be tired and whatever else. They're not going to plan anything. But once the 4 days hits, they're like, okay, that's my weekend. I'm going out for a drink. And that's probably the best time to do some R&R, but it's hard because it's like, we want downtime too, man. We want to unwind and unplug, and sometimes that means having a drink. And I like to have a drink every once in a while. I'm not
saying you shouldn't ever drink.
Yeah.
Ideally, we don't drink because I think it's just putting poison in your body. But goddamn, I'm a bourbon guy and I love bourbon.
Same.
So here I am. I'll have a drink, and I know that it's probably not the best thing for my body. But again, I'm preaching to myself as well. Get my own shit straight, and then I can do some more bitching.
Yeah, everything in moderation. But I mean, like, it's different when you say every single 4 days off, I'm going to go rage for 4 days. Like, we have to be.
And we do have people that do that, obviously.
Sure. Yeah. I think the younger you are, and especially if you're single, the odds are a little higher. But, that's the time to establish good habits too. I'm not going to try to be the wet blanket everywhere. Like, when I'm talking to guys, I'm not going to be like, well, you shouldn't drink at all and you should get perfect sleep and you should never go out. I'm like, no. If you ever see me at FDIC, I'm going to Kilroy's with everybody. I'm staying out till 2:00 in the morning, but most of the year, like, I have a lot of bourbon in my house.
Oh, see, I knew we were friends for a reason. I have an entire
when you say you're bourbon
unit.
guy.
Yeah, I have an entire storage unit bought at rent just to keep some bourbon in there.
Yes. I'm sitting in my speakeasy right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm looking at, actually, I had a bottle of Whistle Pig 10 that's almost gone. Eagle Rare, Woodford Reserve is right behind me. But I'm not drinking that stuff every night. I like having it, but I'm trying to be good about balance and moderation. I don't need to drink every day. I just like to have one every once in a while. And I think that's the big difference. Like, in the same way that one night of bad sleep is not going to ruin you.
No.
But a whole career of it is going to, you know what I mean? I think that's a good observation that the biggest foundational problem is probably sleep. And I think that it's also one that we can address. We can't get a magic bullet and make sleep just magically be fixed with one single thing. It's a combination.
There are a couple ways to deal with it in the firehouse. And like I said, individual bunk rooms, an appropriate alerting system to where if your unit goes out, you get woken up just for that. But there's also some common sense things that chiefs and captains and lieutenants and whoever's in charge could do. Hey, you know what? You look tired. Your job this afternoon is to go get 2 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
If we get a call, we're going out. But for now, you need to go get some sleep because I can see you're dragging right now. Or downtime is encouraged, not just out there nebulously being said there's downtime, but then frowned upon when people take it. Downtime's encouraged. You get a certain time at breakfast, certain time at lunch, take it. There used to be this crazy idea that a firehouse captain could set a bedtime. No, you can't go to bed before 10 o'clock. What? I'm an adult. What do you mean? Sure, I understand we're going to do some training and maybe night ops is scheduled. So sure, all right, so we offset our time, but most times, if you're tired at 8:30 and you know that you're not going to be worth it at 2 a.m. if you don't get some sleep, go to bed.
Absolutely, especially if you're a busy house at night.
Someone said on my show the other day, and I forgot who it was, and they're going to kill me, but someone said on my show that if you can't wake up in the middle of the night and be at the best for your worst call ever, then you're doing yourself a disservice.
That's it. Yeah, and if that means taking a nap during the middle of the day,
take it.
Take it, man. I'm a company officer, and I'm talking to anybody who else listening that's a company officer. I'm a huge proponent. Like, please go shut it down for 45 minutes, an hour, whatever, and be ready. Because if you're a good company officer and you're holding your people accountable for the things that they're supposed to be doing, you have to give them the tools they need to be successful as well. And if these guys and girls are doing their job and they're doing a good job, let them get some freaking rest. If you guys are training, if you guys are running calls, if these people are working hard, you know what I mean? It's like saying, like, you can't eat when you're hungry. It's a normal physiological process. Like, because you're on the clock, like you're on the clock for 24 hours. So there's a direct return on investment for that, man. You sleep for a little bit during the day, you will be more rested when you have to get up in the middle of the night. It's a fact.
We have two rookies in a firehouse right now. One's, I call him rookie because he's the newest one. He slept through a call, which I still give him shit because I'm not sure how you slept through the call when you sleep on he has an individual bunk room, but it just happens to have extra beds in it in case there's bad weather and people come in to sleep. He chose the top bunk because he was afraid he would miss calls. And so the WestNet and alerting system was right above his head. And he still slept through the call because he's dead tired. He's adjusting to this schedule. I think it was the second tour. So the second tour out of recruit school for him. And he felt like crap. He felt like he failed us, whatever it was. I can imagine what that feeling is. And I said, what'd you do? The call came in at 12:30 and he slept through it and they had to come get him. And he goes, I stayed up. And I said, well, wait, what? He goes, yeah, I stayed up. I said, why'd you do that? He goes, I wasn't going to miss another call. I said, I don't care what you do. Don't ever do that again. Yeah. You can't do that. You're not even 2 months into your career and you're going to set yourself up for failure. We'll deal with it that you slept through a call. We'll fix that. Your body is going to adjust. You'll get used to waking up. That was a mistake, but don't compound your mistake and then rob yourself of 5 hours of sleep.
That's important that he heard you say that. You know what I mean? Because he's doing it. You know why he's doing it. He's doing it because he's like, I want the guys to know that, I'm not a screw up and then I'm working hard and I'm not going to let this happen again. And I'm going to show them, I'm going to stay up all night.
And that's not the way to show us.
Don't ever do that again. Right. And, when you told him that, he's like, okay, I got it. I'm going to be able to prove myself and not have to do it like that. When you do stuff like that, in my opinion, you're establishing the new culture the way you want it to be, the way it should be. He's going to mature in his career with a respect for you and your crew that will not be gained in any other way. Like, you can't sit there and tell this new person that they got to get here at 4:00 in the morning, that they got to work their ass off all the time. And then they're going to, if they sleep through a call, they're a shitty employee. You're not going to get respect from that. But if you do it the way that you're doing it, I believe that when they get older in their career, that they're going to know that that's how things are done at that department. We take care of our people. And, it's a huge, huge factor in establishing change of culture is do it to the people coming in.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Stack, this has been awesome, man.
Dude, we didn't even touch on mental health. That's the funny part because that's what the show's all about. We never even touched on it. We'll have to do it again.
I'm definitely bringing you back because I just enjoy having you on. But the side of THC, of psychedelics, and of legality and policy has been such a hot topic for people that listen to this show and also that follow us on Instagram. And every time we post something about it, it just spurs such a crazy conversation in a really good way. And so I know that this was going to be very helpful. And I also want to give mental health its time, that it deserves too. So I probably just slotted a little too much onto one episode, honestly.
No, this is fine. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, man. Same. And we're going to have to do a one specifically on the things we all carry, about how you got that started, and then just make this like a two-parter. You know what I mean?
I'm in. I'm all game for that. I want to let people know again. I like to say it, and I get shit for saying it. I'm just an idiot with a platform. Sometimes I get it right. A lot of times I screw up and I get it wrong, and I have to apologize. But I'm truly just an idiot with a platform trying to do a little bit of good. And I just appreciate people listening to the show and people contributing. It's been a crazy ride, and I've appreciated every minute of it.
Yeah, man. And what's the best place for people to contact you? I know you run 2 pages. So
yeah, they're both on Instagram. So it's The Objectionables. So at The Objectionables on Instagram and at The Things We All Carry, both on Instagram. I have a webpage for the show. So it's thethingsweallcarry.com. And if anybody wants to reach out to share their story with me, because the premise of the show is to discuss some traumas and then discuss how you recover from it, how you move on, and how you operate in your day-to-day life. It's some heavy subjects and topics, and you and I can talk about that next time we talk. But if someone wants to share a story and reach out to me, they can use the email mystory@thethingsweallcarry.com, and that's the easiest way. Or it's mystory@thethingsweallcarry.com or stack@thethingsweallcarry.com.
Nice. And I'm going to link some of those in the show notes and stuff so people can just click on those. And then we're going to be tagging you on social so people can see all that stuff. But guys, if you ever have a chance to listen to The Things We All Carry, there's a lot of really interesting guests on there. And Stack does a really good job of asking pretty good questions and then just letting people tell their story. But also the content on the Objectionables is, some of it's like a sad but true, and some of it's hilarious. And then, the Things We All Carry also has its own page. So go check them out. Give them a follow. Stack, we appreciate you being on, man. Thank you.
Brother, I appreciate it. I love what you're doing, so keep it up.
Likewise, man.